Hello everyone. In process of learning our past, today we learn NCERT class 7, chapter 6, towns, traders and craftsperson. This is the peninsular India, which is covering the maximum places, the important towns that we are going to study in this chapter. That is in South India, we have to see Tanjavur, Tiruvannamalai, Kanchipuram, Hampi, Golconda, Masulipattnam, Bidar, Surat in the west, Ahmedabad, Somnath, Pushkar, Asmer, Vrindavan, Kabul of Afghanistan, Murshidabad, Calcutta. These are the important towns that we are going to study in this particular chapter. These are the trade routes conducted by the Cholas who ruled Tamil Nadu to particularly southeastern part of the world. They had conducted maritime trade also along with the land trade and maritime trade, both the trades they performed. This is one administrative centers. You read about the Chola dynasty in chapter 2, that is kings and kingdoms, in the very same textbook. Let us travel in our imagination to Tanjavur, the capital of Cholas, as it was 1,000 years ago. Tanjavur is located on the bank of river Kaveri, is one of the splendid and beautiful city located in Tamil Nadu. The river Kaveri flows near this beautiful town. One hears the bells of Rajarajeshwara temple, built by King Rajaraja of the Chola dynasty. The townspeople are all praised for its architect Rajaraj, who has proudly carved his name on the temple wall. Inside the temple, there is a massive Shivalinga. Besides the temple, there are palaces with mandapas or pavilions which are located around the temple. Kings hold court in these mandapas, issuing orders to their subordinates. And there are also barracks for the army in these temples. Rajarajeshwara temple and Brihadeshwara temple, these are all the two important temples built by the Cholas in the Tanjavur city. This is the Tanjavur, the capital of Cholas. This is Kanchipuram, the capital of Pallavas. And these are Pandyas, Madurai. This is the view of the South India, particularly the Cholas. This is a beautiful temple built by Raja. This is Brihadeshwara Rajarajeshwara temple built by Raja. The Tanjavur town is bustling with markets selling grains, spices, cloth and jewelry. The Tanjavur town is not only having the temples but also beautiful markets. Water supply for the town comes from wells and tanks as well as river Kaveri. The Saliya weavers of Tanjavur and the nearby town of Raipur are busy producing cloth for cloths to be used in the temple festival, fine cottons for the king and nobility and coarse cotton for the masses. Some distance away at Swami Malai, the Stapatis or sculptors are making exquisite bronze idols, tall ornamental bell metal lamps This is a beautiful town of Tanjavur, which is the capital of today's view, capital of Cholas. Temple towns and pilgrimage centers. Temple towns are those towns which are fully surrounded with temples, and pilgrimage centers are those places where pilgrims used to visit in order to perform their pilgrimage. Tanjavur is also an example of a temple town. This is Tanjavur, rule of temples. Temples were often central to the economy and society. Temples are always giving lot of opportunity for livelihood of the people because many people are keeping their shops around the temples and that is their source of their livelihood. Social, that is pilgrimage is performed. Many people visit to the temple. That's why social gathering also taking place in the temples. Rulers built temples to demonstrate their devotion to various deities. And rulers, especially whether they are Cholas or you can say the rulers of Madurai or Pallavas, or rulers of Kakatiya, rulers of any other place in our country, they used to build the temples to demonstrate their devotion to various deities because they are very much like the gods. Here one Raja Raja is a famous king of Cholas who built magnificent temples. They also endowed temples with grants of land and money to carry out elaborate rituals, feed pilgrims and priests, and celebrate festivals also. These are all some of the important functions performed by the kings throughout India. Pilgrims who flocked to the temples also made donations. Not only kings used to give the money, but also philanthropists and pilgrims who used to visit the temple, they also contribute something to, they give the donations to make the temples. This is a bronze, well metal and the lost wax technique. How the bronze statue is made by using these techniques we will discuss. Bronze is an alloy containing copper and tin. Bell metal contains a greater proportion of tin than other kinds of bronze. This produces a bell-like sound. Chola bronze statues were made using the lost wax techniques. First, an image was made of wax. This was covered with clay and allowed to dry. Next, it was heated and a tiny hole was made in the clay cover. The molten wax was drained out through this hole. Then the molten metal was poured into the clay mold through the hole. Once the metal cooled and solidified, the clay cover was carefully removed and the image was cleaned and polished. This is the way towns and temples. Every town has a temple in the ancient time, and temples, not only temples but also the Muslim worshipping places also were there because Muslims already arrived to India in 711 after Ibn bin Qasim invaded India in the northwest part of India in 711. After that, Arabs started coming into India. Towns emerged around temples such as those of Bhilaswamin, or Bhilsa or Vidisha in Madhya Pradesh, and Somnath in Gujarat. Other important temple towns included are Kanchipuram and Madurai in Tamil Nadu and Tirupati in Andhra Pradesh. These are all, beside that there are so many important towns where we can find temples, Kedarnath, Badrinath, Puri, Kalahasti, Sri Sailam in Andhra. These are all some important places where you can find temples. Pilgrimage centers also slowly developed into the township. Vrindavan, UP and Tiruvannamalai in Tamil Nadu are examples of two such great pilgrimage towns where thousands of people visit every day. Ajmer, Rajasthan was the capital of the Chauhan kings in the 12th century. Ajmer became the Suba headquarters under the Mughals. When the Mughals occupied Ajmer, then we can see it, there is a dargah established, that is a Sufi dargah of Khwaja Mainuddin Dargah is very famous in Ajmer. That's why it is a temple town. We cannot say. We can say it is a Dargah town for Muslim pilgrimage. Ajmer provides an excellent example of religious coexistence because the Ajmer Dargah of Khaja Garibul Namaz or Khaja Muinuddin used to visit every day by both Muslims, Sikh, Christians, even Hindus. All people used to visit this Dargah. That's why it is very, very famous. Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, the celebrated Sufi saint, settled here in the 12th century, attracted devotees from all creeds and religions across the country, sometime in many countries also, particularly Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. Near Ajmer, there is a lake called Pushkar, which has attracted pilgrims from ancient times. Even today, people used to go to Pushkar to visit and to see this place. Pushkar is very close to Ajmer. A network of small towns. From the 8th century onwards, the subcontinent is nothing but the countries of India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal and Bangladesh was dotted with several small towns. These probably emerged from large villages. They usually had a mandapika or mandi of later times to which nearby villagers brought their produce to sell. Mandi is what you can say the wholesale shop or wholesalers from where the retailer used to buy. They also had market streets called Hatta, a heart of later times, lined with shops. Besides, there were streets for different kinds of artisans, such as potters, oil pressers, sugar makers, toddy makers, blacksmith, goldsmith, and stone masons, etc. While some traders lived in the town, others traveled from town to town. They will not have, like nomadic people, they used to travel from one town to another town because they will not have permanent stay in a town. Many come from far and near to these towns to buy local articles and sell products of distant places like horses, salt, camphor, saffron, betel nut, and spices like pepper. These are all sold in the market in all the towns. This is a view of a city market where the things are sold and bought. Usually as a Samanta or in later times a Zamindar built a fortified palace in or near these towns. This is what we can say the fortified palace in near this town. This is mostly built in a higher raised platform or a hillocks. The levy taxes on traders, artisans, and articles of trade and sometimes donated the right to collect these taxes to local temples which had been built by themselves or by rich merchants. So this is also a common feature to be seen there. If they are not busy into collecting taxes, they will assign this task to the local temples so that the local temples used to collect taxes from traders, artisans and articles. These are the traders. Here is a temple, beautiful temple, and this is artisan in action of work. These rites were recorded in the inscriptions that have survived this event history. Taxes on markets. The following is a summary from a 10th century inscription from Rajasthan which lists the dues that were to be collected by temples authorities. There were taxes in kind on sugar and jaggery, dyes, thread and cotton, and coconuts, salt, areca nuts, butter, sesame oil on cloth. This is sugar, jaggery, this is, you can say, the dyes, this is thread, this is cotton, this is coconut, this is salt, this is nut, this is oil, and this is cloth, and this is what, pepper. All these things, and you can see the taxes are imposed on them. Besides, there were taxes on traders, on those who sold metal goods, on distillers, or oil, on cattle fodder, and on loads of grain. So there are on them also taxes are imposed. Some of these taxes were collected in kind while others were collected in cash. So some of the taxes collected in kind, that is, you can see in article way, but some of them collected in cash. This is the button. Traders big and small. Traders may be of big and small, both we can find out here. There were many kinds of traders. These included the Banjaras. Banjaras are nomadic traders. They are not having any permanent house. They are going from town to town. Horse traders formed associations with headmen who negotiated on their behalf with warriors who bought horses. Traders usually traveled in caravans and formed guilds to protect their interests. Go in line, and this is what you can say the traders in the business. This is a Banjara, that is, you can say the nomadic trader, and this is what we have. You can say the horse trading is taking place, and this is a caravan. People, traders are going in group from one place to another to sell their goods. There were several such guilds in South India from the 8th century onwards, the most famous being the Manigramam and Nana Desi. These are the guilds which are controlling trade not only in India, but there are guilds for every profession, like the guilds for blacksmith, goldsmith, weavers, and traders, all these things. They are not only controlling the domestic trade, but also they control trade to the Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia means Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Burma, all these countries, and also China. This is also what we have find out. This is what you can say the completely Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, Manigramam in South India, Nana Desi in West India are the two important guilds of examples who controlled a lot of the trade of domestic as well as international. This is what you can say the trading routes, and what there is a view of, you can say, the market where things are sold. This is the some important, you can say, the channels of trade controlled by the Cholas in Tamil Nadu, and then you can say the Pallavas, and then you can say the Pandyas. There were also communities like the Chettiars and the Marwari Oswal who went on to become the principal trading groups of the country. Gujarati traders, including the communities of Hindu Baniyas and Muslim Bohras, traded extensively with the ports of the Red Sea, Persian Gulf, East Africa, Southeast Asia, and China. They have sold textiles and spices in these ports, and in exchange brought gold and ivory from Africa, because ivory and gold were not available in India, and spices, tin, Chinese blue pottery, and silver from Southeast Asia and China. This is what we can say the Chettiars These are all, we can say, the Marwari Oswald, and this is, and we have the Bohra community where our Honorable Prime Minister is gracing. And this is what we can say the beautiful map of Asia, and here Southeast Asia. This is China, and then you can say this is Africa is not here. Somewhere is this spot. So these are all towns on the west coast were home to Arab, because west coast Arab, because Arabia is very close to west coast. Arab, Persia, Chinese, Jewish and Syrian Christian traders. Indian spices and cloth sold in the Red Sea. This is the Red Sea here. This is Red Sea here. Ports were purchased by Italian traders and eventually reached European markets, because Indian goods are going to Red Sea. From Red Sea it is going to European markets. Spices grown in tropical climate, pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, dried ginger, etc., became an important part of European cooking, and cotton cloth was very attractive. This eventually drew European traders to India. We will shortly read about how this changed the face of trading and towns in future in the coming course of lessons. This is a paper, also one of the important commodity, which is a part of the trade, and this is what you can say the and nut. This is what we have the dried ginger and cloth. These are all the important items of, we can say, this is cinnamon. All these became very important things to trade in those days. Now we will discuss about the important city of Afghanistan, that is Kabul. This is Kabul, this is Afghanistan map, and Kabul is the capital of Afghanistan. Kabul became politically and commercially important town from the 16th century onwards. Kabul is located in a mountainous zone, hilly zone. Kabul along with Kandahar were linked to the celebrated Silk Route, which was from China to Europe. Besides, trade in horses was primarily carried on through these routes. In the 17th century, Jean-Baptiste Tavernier from France, a diamond merchant, estimated that the horse trade at Kabul amounted to rupees 30,000 annually, which was a huge sum in those days. Camels carried dried fruits, dates, carpets, silks, and even fresh fruits from Kabul to the subcontinent and elsewhere. Subcontinent means to India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and slaves were also brought from Kabul to the subcontinent. So that's why Kabul is very, very important center in those days. Crafts in towns. The craftspersons of Bidar is in Karnataka, were so famed for their inlay work in copper and silver that it came to be called Bidari. The Panchalas or Vishwakarma community, which consisting of goldsmith, bronzesmith, locksmith, masons, and carpenters, were essential to the building of temples. They also played an important role in the construction of palaces, big buildings, tanks, and reservoirs. Similarly, weavers such as the Salayar or Kaikolors emerged as prosperous communities, making donations to temples even. Some aspects of cloth making, like cotton cleaning, spinning, and dyeing, became specialized and independent crafts in those days. These are all the crafts, and see here beautiful crafts work made by craftsmen, a shawl border, and a 17th century candle stand of brass with block overlay. This is what we have just now read, that a closer look to Hampi, Machilipatnam and Surat. And this is a Surat, this is Bidar, this is Golconda, and this is Hampi. These are all we have studied. This Pushkar, Ajmer, and Somnath temple, which was invaded by Muhammad Ghazni several times. Surat has a very famous trading center. Is Calcutta. This is Machilipatnam in Andhra, Hampi in Karnataka, Madurai in Tamil Nadu. These are all the important places to discuss now. We shall discuss about Hampi, Machilipatnam. The architectural splendor of Hampi. Hampi is located in the Krishna Tungabhadra basin on the bank of Tungabhadra, and it was the capital of Vijayanagara. The city was founded in 1336 and was made as the capital of Vijayanagara, that is Sangama dynasty, by Harihara I and Bukka I. The magnificent ruins at Hampi reveal a well fortified city. No mortar or cementing agent was used in the construction of these walls. The technique followed was to wedge them together by interlocking. The architecture of Hampi was distinctive, is very quite different. It is not looking like other Indian cities. The buildings in the royal complex had splendid arches, domes, and pillared halls with niches for holding sculptures. They also had well-planned orchards and pleasure gardens with sculptural motifs such as the lotus and corbels. Temples were the hub of cultural activities and Devadasi system is still appearing in somehow or other. A temple dancers who perform dance, classical dance, or other important local dances before the deity. The Mahanavami festival, which was organized on Mahanavami Dibba, which is one of the important places of Royal Center, known today as Navaratri in the south, was one of the most important festivals celebrated at Hampi. But unfortunately, Hampi was sacred and declined after 1565 when it was attacked by the Muslim Nawabs of Bijapur, Ahmednagar, and Golconda. In the Tallikota battle, the Vijayanagara kings were defeated and the Hampi city lost its glory and prosperity, and it declined. This is a beautiful city of Surat, which is located in Gujarat state. It is a well populous and industrialized city in a gateway to the west, and Surat that we are going to discuss. Surat in Gujarat was the emporium of western trade during the Mughal period, along with Cambay, today called as Kambad, and somewhat later on Ahmedabad. Surat was the gateway for trade with West Asia via the Gulf of Hormuz. Through this Gulf, the Surat has done wonderful trade with the West Asian countries. Surat has also been called the gateway to Makkah. Makkah, as you all know, is a holy place, a pilgrimage city of Muslims living all around the world. Because many pilgrim ships set sail from Surat only to Makkah. That's why it is very, very important. The city was cosmopolitan and people of all castes and grades live there. So there is a bhaichara prevail in this city. 17th century, Portuguese, Dutch, and English had their factories and warehouses. There were also several retail and wholesale shops selling cotton textiles in Surat. The textiles of Surat were famous for their gold lace borders, that is zari, and had markets not only in India but in West Asia, Africa, and even many parts of Europe. There were magnificent buildings and innumerable pleasure parks in Surat. The Kathiawar Seths and Mahajans, that is money chargers, had huge banking houses at Surat. However, Surat began to decline towards the end of the 17th century. This is a beach in Machilipatnam, and now we have to discuss about the Manginapudi beach, and now the fishing in troubled waters, Masulipattnam. Today we call it as Bandar or Machilipatnam, but in those days Masulipattnam. The town of Masulipattam is located in AP, and Masulipattam, what we can call today literally fish port town, lay on the delta of the Krishna River. In the 17th century, it was a center of intense activity. The fort in Masulipattam was built by the Dutch. Dutch is also known as Holland or Netherlands, who came to do trade in our country. Both the Portuguese and Dutch East India companies attempted to control Machilipatnam and its trade. The Qutub Shahis rulers, seeing this, imposed royal monopolies on the sale of textiles, spices and other items to prevent the trade passing completely into the hands of the various East Indian companies. So they are not happy the way the things are going on, and they thought that though Machilipatnam was a part of Golconda, Golconda was held by Mir Jumla. He was a governor at that time. So he had imposed sanctions on the foreign companies. Competitions among various trading groups, the Golconda nobles, Persian merchants, Telugu Komati Chettis and European traders made the city most populous and prosperous. As the company traders moved to Bombay, Calcutta, present day Kolkata, and Madras, present day Chennai, Machilipatnam lost its glory, its prosperity, and its merchants and prosperity declined in the course of the 18th century, being today nothing more than a dilapidated little town. So now it is not a prosperous town, but in the medieval time, modern times, it was one of the most prosperous towns. The last important topic in this chapter is the new towns and the traders. In the 16th and 17th centuries, European countries were searching for spices such as cardamom, and clove, and pepper, and textiles had become popular both in Europe and West Asia. English, Dutch, and French formed East India companies in order to expand their commercial activities in the eastern part of India. Initially, great Indian traders like Mullah Abdul Ghaffur and Riji Ora, who owned a large number of ships, competed with them. They could not compete for longer times. However, the European companies used their naval power to gain control of the sea trade and forced Indian trade to work as their agents. Ultimately, the English emerged as the most successful foreign commercial company and political power in the subcontinent. They defeated their arch rivals French in battles of Karnataka and in battles of, you can say, the spread in the demand for goods like textiles led to the greater expansion of the crafts of spinning, weaving, bleaching, dyeing, etc. The 18th century saw the rise of Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras, which are nodal cities today. And because of the rise of these new cities, the old cities have lost their prosperity and glory. Crafts and commerce underwent major change as the merchants and artisans were moved into the black towns where the Indian craftspersons used to live, established by the European companies within these new cities. Now from black town they moved from all around the city. This was happened after the formation of new towns and traders. This is Vasco da Gama. Vasco da Gama is a sailor from Portuguese and who discovered sea route to India. Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese sailor, was one of those who sailed across the Atlantic to the African coast, went around it, crossing over to the Indian Ocean. His first journey took more than a year. He reached Calicut in 1498 CE and returned to Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, the following year. He lost two of his four ships and of the 170 men at the start of the journey. Only 54 survived. In spite of the obvious hazards, the routes that were opened up proved to be extremely profitable and he was followed by English, Dutch and French sailors. So the sea route to India was discovered by Vasco da Gama. After the discovery of sea route, the land route and sea route both used for trade expansion. On the assumption that the earth was round, Christopher Columbus, an Italian, decided to sail westwards across the Atlantic Ocean to find a route to India. He landed in the West Indies, which got their name because of this confusion in 1492. He was followed by sailors and conquerors from Spain and Portugal who occupied large parts of Central and South America, often destroying earlier settlements and cultures in that area. Thank you very much for patient here.